We are live. Hello, welcome. Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Chill Film Discussion. Once again, I'm here, Patrick. Here's my friend Austin below. And we have another guest today. Actually, the first reoccurring guest of the series, Paradate, or our Fabian, friend from high school. Yay, welcome to the stream, Fabian. How are you?
Doing all right.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to start real quick because he's got to drop off in 45 minutes. So no time wasted. All right. Today's episode, The Man from Earth. It is an indie film. It is a 2007 American drama science fiction film written by Jerome Bixby, directed by Richard Schenkman. And it stars these professors, I think, they're all professors. A professor, John Oldman, who's played by David Lee Smith, and his colleagues. There are a lot of them. I'm not going to name all of them, but basically we have different, a biologist, an art history professor, anthropologist, archaeologist. Oh yeah. Anyway, a whole plethora of different fields, and basically the premise of the film is it's all set in literally one house, one room, and they just have hypotheticals about whether or not a caveman can have lived and experienced millennia of
or 14,000 years.
14 millennia or something. Lived more than 14 millennia. I think that's what the exact, not the amount of time that they're theorizing or they're theoretically saying.
Right.
So, essentially, it's a pretty self-contained movie. It all takes place in one room. It's basically just about a discussion. But the main part is the dialogue. What's most interesting, at least from my opinion, is the dialogue, what they talk about, the hypotheticals they talk about, the ideas they talk about. That's somewhat fascinating, and I just want to see how you guys feel overall about the movie. We'll start with our guest, Fabian. How do you said you like this movie, I think. Well, to me at least.
I personally like this movie quite a bit, although it is also a very interesting kind of movie because it's almost it's not your typical, it's weird. It's a weird format for this kind of thing where essentially the whole movie is the dialogue.
Yeah.
But I still thought it was effective, but a lot of there were no interesting visual effects, I think. A lot of the components I usually have in a movie that filmography and etc. This just has none. It's just dialogue.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So when I watched it, I just found the whole idea kind of interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily a unique idea, this idea that there's someone who has lived through all of history and witnessed everything, and discussing that with colleagues and whether or not it's possible and different aspects of the idea. But I still think that regardless of whether it's unique, they still did the dialogue still exposed it in an interesting way. And that's why I enjoyed the movie. But yeah, it's just not necessarily a movie that I would recommend to people, I guess, just because it's a weird kind of movie. It's just dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true. I also so this is my second time watching this, and first time I found it very interesting, very very unique and very very new, as you said, Fabian. How it's just all dialogue focused, and they only sit in kind of one location. They don't really move around, and it's just the plot is moved along, right, or the whole story is moved along by these characters, going back at each other, going how they talk to each other, their interactions, and just new scenarios and ideas that come out, right, that they bring up, almost kind of in the organic conversation. Sometimes it might have felt forced, but each time they questioned him, right, and they delve into each question, and then after, when they explore that topic, that's when it gets interesting. But I feel like there are different parts of this movie, different beats, right, that work well, that work really really well, and it's just kind of interesting how they kind of to explore some of the topics of how someone could have remained immortal, and then also like how he explains like where the main character was at different points in time, and trying to I guess give himself like an alibi almost, like that they're questioning him, like interrogating him, right? And he's always giving these answers. And when they give it back, while obviously it's fictional, right? It's also very interesting and almost realistic in how he kind of replies back to all the inquiries that are against him. So it's definitely was interesting and kind of unique movie to watch, and just there was a lot to explore about what they went into, and especially it's interesting that they have all these academics right around trying to give a little bit more I guess weight, right, a little bit more believability, like, oh, these people are supposed to be in their field, top of their field, and they question him. They try to dissect every aspect and try to look at everything from a different angle to explore how someone could be immortal and how they could maybe go through different points in history and in time and whatnot. So it's definitely an interesting movie.
Yeah, it being completely focused on the dialogue, where there's not really much cinematography going on, is interesting. Like, I wonder if would have just been better if it was just a novel, like a book or short story or something like that, where it was purely just like all dialogue and you just read it. To me, it feels like it could have kind of fulfilled the same purpose as it did this movie, except all in text form instead of like visual form. There are a couple of things I think that were done are kind of neat visually. There's a scene I remember. Near the end when they're around the fireplace, they're talking about John was talking about like his past and everything, and then at some point I think the old professor dude, Will is his name. He like turns on the light and he demands that John tell it's a hoax, or else he's going to put him into psychiatric like something like help. And then it was really amusing, because usually it's like that saying like, let there be light and like the truth will unfold or something like that. It was interesting because it was like, let there be light, because there was this fireplace, right? That was the only source of light. And then it was like, let there be light, and then John like kind of just tells a lie, like he just lies about like everything he said, because he doesn't want to like harm or continue with this like like confuse them even more, confuse his colleagues even more, because there were a couple that were like just like
mentally distressed
by it, especially the woman, the art history devout Christian woman, Edith, I think her name was. The character's name is. She was like not buying into any of it. Well, maybe in the end she was kind of like she was starting to believe, but like she just didn't want to believe, essentially. And it was kind of ironic, because usually light represents, I think, truth or something, but in this case light was like a lie. Almost. So it was yeah, this movie that I thought that was, in terms of like symbolism and visuals and all that, I think that was like the most prominent, at least from my perspective. But yeah, I don't know. This movie was very much like, it's kind of similar to The Breakfast Club. I don't know if any of you guys have watched The Breakfast Club, but basically Breakfast Club is like set in one room, and it's about these kids who get to know each other through detention. So yeah, interesting. Low budget, not much needed. I like how they were like taking away the furniture away from the house. It's like, all right, budget of the movie is like leaving the setting. Anyway, that was disappointing. Yeah, it's like the most like interesting things that happen visually are the things that like are very mundane. It's like the furniture moving, or like the light, the fireplace opening up, like fire happening, like the food moving around and stuff. It wasn't like, not too much. Yeah, I guess so like going on about there's not much visually going on, but like the dialogue is the central part, right? So like in terms of the dialogue, like this movie brings about a lot of like different questions, like hypotheticals and ideas. I think one of the biggest things is probably like the kind of like reality, in a sense. Like, how do you define like maybe like your reality versus like, I don't know, so-called true reality, if there's such a thing called true reality, because like there's a lot of interesting things that like the other colleagues were asking John about, like, oh, like what happened during this time, or like blah blah blah, but like he doesn't have like an omniscient point of view. He just has his own point of view, and then he kind of like has to like match it with that of history, in a sense, like it's, or the history textbooks or whatnot. So like, how do you guys feel about like if you were in his shoes, how would you view, like how would you explain these sort of ideas to like people who want to act, who are interested, or like are kind of want to understand? I don't know. I don't know if I phrased that correctly, but it's like, yeah. We can just start talking about the ideas.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, okay, it's been a while since I watched this movie, but I feel like, yeah, you just explain like where you were at the time and what happened like at the local place. Like, or I don't know exactly. I mean, I think he did a reasonable job of like showing that.
But like, you don't really remember where you were. Like, there was like I think Edith asked a question about like, oh, where were you at this specific date, like year? And then he was like, he retorted like, oh, where were you a year ago on this day? Like, do you remember?
Yeah, that's what I like about this movie, right? It didn't make him, as you said, omniscient, right? It made him like, oh, he can only see history through his own eyes, and where he was at the time, right? So people always ask him, well, where were you at here? Do you remember this time? It's like, well, just like a regular human being, I can't remember every single thing, right? I can, there's lapses in my memories. I'm not going to be able to remember like where I was at exactly at this point this year, especially if he's lived so long, right? Memories fleeting, and then exactly in terms of location, he explains it away, like nobody can really tell. He can really recite where they were exactly. I feel like there's sometimes I don't know if it's common, but a lot of times when you have like these kind of like time traveling or someone who's lived through history, they're able to like say, oh yeah, I was in this point location, I remember this time, or this historic figure. And while it's true that John is able to say he's met a few historical figures, there are other times where he's just like he doesn't have an answer, right? He doesn't have he just explains it away. And I think that was pretty realistic, right? Just like, oh yeah, I can't I can only look back in time. I can only gather what I know from after the fact, right? Like once he learns it from the current times of the day, he's able to kind of piece together his own past, right? He's able to say, oh yeah, like this is like the ocean, or this is this is the location. I was in France, I was in England. This is certain ideas and whatnot. He was able to kind of or certain physical locations or physical phenomenons. He's able to piece that together after he's learned about it. When the human race is able to kind of have that discovery, right? Like the world is flat or the world is round. He always thought like, oh yeah, maybe I kind of I could have sailed with Columbus and I thought the world was round, but I always had that fear that he would fall off.
Oh.
But then after the fact, he kind of learns, oh, the world is round, and now he's able to kind of learn through that as the human race kind of learns different points in time, or different areas of knowledge, right? So it's just like he's always able to kind of absorb that fact, but also I think it's just a believable way that he was able to kind of explain it, and I think it did a good job, right? Trying to like deflect and just trying to reason why he's not able to know everything and everything that that happened in his past, because like other human beings, we're not able to remember certain like mundane things that happen to us, recount like maybe like the more important moments in life. So yeah,
it's interesting. It's like basically his whole story is like you can't really prove that's true, but you also can't disprove it. So it's like in this weird space of like believable but not believable, or like truth but not truth. It's weird. Like something that got me thinking about this movie when I watched it is like I mean, this is going into philosophical because I feel like this movie is pretty like philosophical, but like, is there absolute truth? Like, or is truth just subjective based on how we record it? Like people view it, like the majority of people view it. kind of like, yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, just gonna say I feel like the question of like the truth in history, where like today we have some like theory of what might have happened at certain important dates in the past, but like we don't actually know what happened there. We don't have a time machine where we can go back and see if our hypotheses reflect the reality.
Yeah.
I thought that was a little bit interesting. Just things like so again, it's been a while since I watched it, but things like his experience being, I think he said he was Jesus in some sense.
Yeah,
right?
He was Jesus. Yeah, he basically converted. He was like, yeah, I was Jesus, and I like tried to leave undetected, but his devout followers were like around him. So like they saw him rise from the grave, and then he's like, "Oh my God, a religion is born." Yeah, but yeah, Austin, did you have anything to say about that?
I mean, I think it's interesting how they kind of tie religion. I think that was the biggest portion of it, right? Like the religious history, right? At the beginning, like I kind of like was wondering who he was, but once they started listing all these characters, like, oh yeah, well you were this, I was like, oh my God, they're trying to say that he was Jesus Christ, which I thought was like very interesting how they went about it. I like how they led into it and how the story he kind of explains how he is actually the Christ that was the Lord. But I kind of figured out after they start listing, I was like, oh, he's once they say, oh, he was a religious figure, and then they start listing people like he's not. I was like, oh, they're leading down to this path, and then when he revealed it, I was just like, oh, it's interesting. That's how he kind of explains it away, that he was just a school teacher, right, trying to teach or trying to say these lessons that he learned, and he learned it from the Buddha, right? That's what he said. He so that was another historic figure. So he went to he went to all the way into India, learned from the Buddha, like the teachings, which is kind of this is maybe how they kind of explain how religions is all kind of connected in terms of morality and whatnot. He tries to bring those teachings of the Buddha to the back to the West, right?
Yep.
And talk about it. And people started following him. He was crucified, but he's able to block out pain and whatnot, lower his heart rate from what he learned in his time in India, and then he gets resurrected because he's able to come back alive, which is it's very interesting that they went that route, right? They explained it, like they explained each portion of it in a way that us as the viewers like can kind of buy into. Like, okay, so he's learning, so he, or not, but it kind of connects it, right? Like connects like his story. Like they put points and they all connect, right? And that was very interesting. And then he gets resurrected, and then how he sees, his teachings, and he tries to explain like he doesn't know every single thing that he's taught, right? But he's the one who's found it and able to explain it all away, and how he wants people to just take away from his teachings to be a kind of just good people, right? And how sometimes people kind of just went away with it, made churches and made festivities and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then also explaining his name away, right? Like, where did Jesus Christ come from? He's like, my name was John, right? And John kind of, kind of was like, turned into, these different, forms to different languages to where it became just, Jesus Christ. So that was very, very interesting, I thought, and just how they connected, like how they kind of, brought religion to it, and just how they explained it away.
Yep.
So I thought it was. That was very, very intelligent. I would say way to bring forth that portion, but it also kind of threw me for a loop because I did not expect it to go that way. And when it did, I think that was probably the most intimate and also the most engaging part of the movie when they all talk about religion. And then that's what they did with the setting, right? They put it in a fireplace where it's like warm and glowing. They turned on like this. Classical music, right?
Beethoven,
and it felt very intimate, right?
Yep.
They're very warm because there's fire, there's the shadows, right? And so everything's like kind of close up, right? We just hear him talking with the music in the background. It's just like a very, I want to say passionate, but very, kind of dark, just because this is kind of like a revelation, right? That no one really expected, or maybe no one really wanted to hear or know. And it's at that point in the movie where kind of people start like buy into it, and it kind of draws you in to what he's saying, and I thought that was a very effective scene, that whole portion when he talks about religion and how he's Jesus Christ, and talking about that and revealing that.
Yeah, I feel like if you're like really religious, I don't know. It would be fun. It'd be interesting to view this film from a religious perspective. Like if you were like devout Christian and you like listen to Anoltis and be like, well, wait, what? You know, like would you? I don't know. Would you be like, this is blasphemous, or would you be like, huh?
Religious.
Okay, it's kind of like, yeah, maybe there's like caveman out there. No, no, I doubt it. I doubt it. I know it'd just be interesting. I mean, it's just a movie. It's fiction, right? Unless there's truth to it, but we will never know. I suppose. Yeah, yeah. So I think there was a whole like section of like the ideas they talk about in terms of like nature or truth versus like lies, and how I think there was some quote saying that like, the truth is so simple compared to like what it's perceived to be. So there's like all these grandiose stories about like, you know, the apostles and, you know, in like the New Testament or something, Old Testament, they were talking about that. And then John was saying like, oh yeah, you know, the apostles didn't actually do any teaching. They were just like he simplified everything down to like bare bones, and people were, it's just, yeah, it's just interesting to think that like I don't know if you guys ever tell like a story or something, you kind of like exaggerate it. There's times when you exaggerate that story. Sometimes, I mean, I've done it before, but the truth itself is very like lackluster compared to the stories that you may hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of touch on that already, right? They kind of say, or the psychologist, right? What was it? Will, I think he was like, oh, you know, there's, you know, some point in the story where there's gaps, and then improvisation kind of pops up, right? Where people kind of, you know, talk about it and, you know, fill these stories and as you said, you know, make it a little bit more flashy, more interesting.
Yeah. It's Austin, you remember the movie we watched, The Big Fish?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry, Fabian. So The Big Fish is basically a story. It was like a movie about the son and father, and how the father likes to tell these exaggerated stories because the truth is boring, basically. He wants to be known for his stories. His stories are more interesting, so he tells more interesting stories, exaggerates them, basically. Which is like kind of like what they were discussing in this movie about how like the truth is much simpler than the story suggests. Yeah. Another part I actually really liked about the movie, they touched on relativity a bit. And there was one quote that they had, which really, I was like, yo, that's pretty cool, is that Linda, I think one of the girls' name was Linda. She was like a student. She was like, a clock measures time, right? And like, you know, right, thinking that like time is absolute, right? Time is like, you know, a clock can measure the absolute parameter of like what is time defined as. But actually, it's a clock itself only measures like basically like how do they just phrase it? It's like it measures itself, but not only like irrespective to another. So you basically like there's no like objective like measurement of it. Like a clock only measures its own sense of like what time is defined as. They measure themselves essentially.
Right.
Like if you want to have like an objective of this clock, like you have to use another clock to measure. Like, okay, basically the quote was like, okay, I think the quote, exactly, I'm looking up right now. So someone asserts clocks measure time, right? But then Dan comes back and says, no, they measure themselves. The objective referent of a clock is another clock. And this kind of plays into like relativity, like special relativity in the sense that like, you know, like if you have a clock on a spaceship that's traveling near the speed of light, the clock, and you have a clock you have a point of reference, a clock on Earth, like from the perspective of the person on the spaceship, the clock is going to stay the same as the clock on Earth. But when they converge back together, the clocks will be different. Like the different amount of time will have passed something like that. I think that I might butchered it, but this is like, from my, knowledge of relativity, which is limited.
Well, should be more.
Anyway, it's basically saying it's basically suggesting that there is like, when it comes to time, there's no way we can objectively measure it, because we only have our point of reference. Hence relativity, because like the name relativity, because it's like relative.
So is the way that this comes back to the story, like the rest of the story, like relative memories, or like you might remember something different from other people, or the real reality? And
yeah. So like, is it like when you remember something, when you record it, or you put it down in the history books, is it like, what is, like, how do you measure like absolute truth as history progresses? Like we basically only can measure it at one perspective at a time, and like we can like compile all of it, right? But is that the objective truth? Which is, I guess in this movie it's suggesting it's not, because everything is relative to whatever the perspective of who was like writing, whoever was measuring something at that time. I think that's what the movie was suggesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I thought another big theme of the movie was so there was oh gosh, wait, hold on. No, I forgot. Never mind.
Wait, what? Are you talking about one of the characters?
No, I was good. Oh gosh, sorry. Okay, I was thinking earlier. There was another big theme I thought in the movie. So we've been talking about this kind of memory thing, and you have lapses in memory, and then also like there being different kinds of truths. All right, you guys just keep talking.
I'm kind of respond to Patrick. I think you're right. Like how it's all relative, and we kind of just see it's all about like John's kind of John's truth, right? Just what we think his truth is, right? And then how he shares it, and how everyone kind of accepts it, right? Because he says all these things, people kind of refute him or try to refute him, and he kind of gives an answer back to them what they're trying to say.
Yep.
He can only provide what he's able to see, and then and then also what he kind of not just what he's able to see, but also what he's able to gather, right? Because he's able to finally reveal some things after, I guess, as I said, after the fact, and the rest of his also have different viewpoints and able to dissect him, but only in a different kind of different light in a way, and they also bring their own kind of specialty, their own knowledge, and then it's different truth that kind of builds into what he's saying. And I think that's why people start kind of believing him, just because of the way he says it and able to connect it, and how he runs with it, and if someone kind of tells that to you, if you're in that situation, someone says more able to fight back with every kind of answer, and you have all these out there academics try and disprove him, and he everyone else kind of cannot. It kind of is kind of I think for them just eye opening, kind of, right? Just like, oh, this guy is actually who he says he is, because there's no way to refute it until he actually says it's all fake. So
yeah, I think near the end they're kind of like treating him like almost like a higher being. It's like he had their full attention, and they're like, oh my gosh, do you know, like, like you've experienced more lifetimes than everyone else, so you know more, and you like have more truth, like you have like higher like amounts of knowledge, and they were like very. Yeah, at least I felt like that from my perspective. But
so
like,
that actually it was related to the theme that I was thinking of earlier, which was just like knowledge and wisdom relative to the amount of time that you've just spent living.
Okay.
And I sort of felt like they were sort of going the opposite direction, where despite living for 14,000 years, Like he's relatively wise. He's been through a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe no more wiser than someone who's lived like 50, 100 years, but nevertheless. But the amount of knowledge that he has is still very limited, because although he has gotten all of these degrees in a bunch of fields, that knowledge that he like, I mean, from working in those fields for so long is already well outdated. And at this point, it's like comparable to what you might get in a broad like college class or something.
Right.
So he might not actually be more qualified in all of those fields than other people like just learning for a few years in the modern world, because modern science advances so rapidly.
Yeah. That's a good point. Actually, yeah. So like he has much more time to live. Like he has more time to gather all these like more knowledge, but the rate of which knowledge is increasing from like humans in general is just like outpaces like any amount of time he can spend absorbing that knowledge, right? It's like there's a statistic. It's like even if you spend like your whole life just watching YouTube videos, you'll never unless you like assuming you don't watch it 2x like more normal speed on like one monitor and whatever, like you'll never outpace that of like how many videos are actually being posted at a time, because that rate is much faster than the rate that you can watch it at. Sort of like that's the sentiment. Yeah, I agree with that. That's a pretty interesting tidbit, I guess.
No, but I think it's also very interesting what you brought up, Fabian, right? Like how this guy is not as kind of any wiser than any other person, right? Just because like as you said, like he had like several degrees, right? But it's only at the best set of what the knowledge of that time is, right? And then we come to him today, and he's like I think a history professor, right? But he's still not able to, he had degrees in like anthropology and all these other things, and he couldn't really explain everything away. And it kind of goes back to like the whole relativity. Like he only knows things after the fact, and he's not able to absorb the best of the knowledge at the time, or he only knows like he's only able to study one subject. But as you said, it just gets outdated, and he can't really explain it away anymore. And I just thought that was again, another interesting tidbit that they kind of reveal for this character, like how he's not all knowing, not all wise, right? I mean, he has experience, right? And he says, hey, I had time, right, to study, but I maybe know some of the basic facts or maybe the foundations, but it all could, could be, complete BS by the time, it's already kind of revealed, right? So he maybe knows like basic things, but he's not able to know everything. And I think that's, the good thing part is like he's not an expert at all fields, right? He's just able to, gather what he knows and with time able to kind of, discern that he's not the best at everything, and able to just, impart that out to the others and make them aware that he's not like this all-knowing, but everyone else kind of thinks he is, because he's, this immortal who's lived through the, everything and able to, absorb all this, but he really isn't.
Yeah, and I sort of feel like some of these could be a bit controversial. Like I sort of buy that wisdom does not necessarily grow over time. Someone who's older is not necessarily is not necessarily wiser. But I don't know if I buy the knowledge thing. I feel like if you've been alive for 1,000 years and have had time to like dive into these fields, like although science is growing, like I think they make a good point in the movie, but I also don't know if I buy it completely, because I mean, if he's been like, I mean, there's just things that were there like 100 years ago, which are still applicable now. I mean, for example, maybe he was like a musician at some point. Like maybe he's forgotten how to play those instruments, but like that's an example of something that I guess hasn't progressed that much. And also if he's had a lot of time to think about like problems in all these other fields like physics and whatnot, then I mean, although like the current, I guess, body of, although the current knowledge has expanded, I guess the expertise and the techniques might still be applicable. Like just the ways of thinking about new problems, basically, like, and trying to solve these problems. That seems like still like something that can build over time. So I don't know. I feel like it's kind of, to me, it's that part's kind of debatable. I mean, I could see it being like what the movie says, but I also feel like I don't entirely buy it.
I mean, I think in a way, like him being able to, like, pursue knowledge, right? This guy's very smart. I think his thirst for knowledge, his ambition for knowledge, I think that can stay the same, right? And he's always trying to but I think some of the fields, right, that he studied and had degrees in might have obviously changed a lot. Like he says that he has the degrees of every single person in the room except for the psychologist, right? So one degree, that he had, there's the biologist, right? Biology has changed in terms of what has been studied over the years, right? Or when he was, from prehistory all the way to 1900s, right? Biology has changed, immensely, or what people have understood about it. And I think, he maybe if he only has a degree from one type of era, and he might not have studied it, afterwards, it might have, his study of biology might have changed until he may take a course later in it to kind of reveal, but he won't be even an expert and able to recite every single thing, especially. And then the same thing with history and the other anthropology, right? How people kind of study humans and culture, that all kind of changed. So I think with the people of the fields in that room, all the other professors, I think that probably has different, he might have again the foundations, but it could probably, I think it's different in terms of unless he kept up with it, and he might have, right, because he does have time. His understanding would probably be very different from what other people probably have studied or who are now experts in their field. He might not be able to compare. He might be able to contribute to the conversation, but I don't know if people could say he's the leading expert in that area or field anymore.
Also, I don't know, maybe he's just more distracted. As time progresses, there are more distractions. If he was alive during this time, wow, there's a lot of distractions that could.
Yeah,
he has to really put his mind to it. I mean, think about it. If you have unlimited, not unlimited, but if you have lived for so long, and time no longer is a resource, a valuable resource to you because you have so much time, how would you devote your time to, would you necessarily devote your time to one specific field, or would you just want to embrace and experience all these different changes that the world has come about has created? I don't know.
So is this sort of, so are you saying, would you do it? So which one are you saying that he did? Did he?
Oh,
I mean, it seems like he sort of focused on one field every few decades.
Yes,
right? So
yes,
it's
yes.
not either of these cases necessarily. It's it's sort of in between. He hasn't focused on one for his whole life.
Yeah. Wouldn't you at some point get bored, or feel you get bored and you want to experience something else? Or you may not prioritize it because it's oh yeah, I can get to that later because I have enough time.
Could that be sort of an explanation for why he bounces around these different fields so much, because he gets bored of one of them and then
I can always I can come back to it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel if I were in his shoes, I would just be if time is no longer a resource, essentially, it's I don't really have to, I could do whatever. I feel I'm at least in the short term, I could just do whatever I want, without having to be guilty of wasting my time,
Yeah. But on the other end of it, would you then be questioning what would the point of it be? What I'm studying in right now, and it becomes outdated.
Oh, it becomes outdated.
Outdated in 20, 30 years, right? And I'm dividing up this whole period of time just studying. But then, you have time, right? Maybe I'll just focus now, but what would it be worth it, right? Maybe for us, with limited time and Monopoly, but for him, it was maybe he doesn't care, or maybe he just do it as a form of entertainment. I don't know, but I think that's another question that comes up, right?
That's true. I wonder if he thinks that what I'm if he studies what I'm studying now, is this the truth? What if it gets replaced in the next century? I mean, I guess there's some things that have relatively have kind of solidified its mainstay in our knowledge space, atoms, particles, and all that mathematics. Mathematics is a man-made invention, though, right? It's not something necessarily natural. It's I think, right? Isn't that the idea? Mathematics by itself is just logic, and logic is.
I mean, that makes sense, but at the same
man-made.
time, they're not going. If they've been proven, they're not going to suddenly change over time, I guess.
Right.
even if it has no basis in like the world, like it's still, I guess, at least it's true in some sense.
Yeah, that's true. And like also like I mean like all these disciplines they kind of like study some aspect of nature, right? And nature is always evolving. So like the fields will always evolve as we like catch up and try to figure out like how to measure nature itself. Yeah, it's just
He must be very good at recognizing what people like what scientists of the day don't actually know for sure.
yeah.
Do that a lot.
He's probably like he probably doesn't probably has that like wisdom of like not not discounting crediting or discounting anything, like anything's possible sort of thing. It's like I've seen a lot and like a lot of anything is possible.
We thought one thing, and it actually is like the complete opposite. He's able to like see that and like, oh, I don't know what's true anymore.
I bet he would be like a really big. I could see him being really big into conspiracy theories. I'm just kidding. Maybe certain ones. I'm sure he would be one into like aliens, for instance. I don't know, like UFOs. I'm sure he would believe that. Or like, he wouldn't disprove it. He wouldn't be like, oh, that's nonsense. He would keep an open mind about it for sure. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't really know what else to. Okay. Actually, I do want to discuss a little bit the characters themselves. So near the end, the people who kind of believed him were the two youngest. I think it was like Linda and like Sandy. Yeah. They seemed like they believed him, and then it was
also,
like
I think the one of the other guys too believed him.
Yeah. Dan,
the African American, the anthropologist, I think.
Yeah, is he an anthropologist?
Yeah.
Yeah, he yeah. Near the end, he kind of believed like it looked like he believed him because there was like a scene where he like was driving away and then he like took out the little
holding the burr.
He's like, oh, he speaks truth. And then Harry the biologist, I think he kept an open mind. Like he was like, oh yeah, this like he didn't disprove it. He didn't like he was like ah. And then there were like three other people. Like Art was like, I'm never going to see you again. Get out of my sight. And then I think Edith was like, oh, thank goodness it's not true. But in the end, before she left, she like touched him. It was as if it was like, oh my God, I might be touching Jesus Christ himself. Like that's what I felt. Because she was like, it was like a really like lot of like, she touched his face and like kissed him. I mean, it could have been like, oh, goodbye. But like, it felt like maybe in the back of her mind, she might have been like, maybe this is like my one opportunity. Like I'm like touching Jesus himself. That's sort of like what was going through my mind. And then Will was like, yeah, you're going to be in a psychiatric ward if you're like, but then he stays and then he overhears the conversation and then like realizes that he's John Oldman's dad or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like,
dad.
And then gets a heart attack or like he dies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was like, what? Also, like, and then the ending, I think the Dan and Sandy were like, so Sandy loved John, right? But it was like unrequited or something. Yeah. Well, actually, it might have been ambiguous. Maybe like, maybe John was like, oh yeah, stay with me for 10 years and then move on. but like also like Sandy and I think Dan shared like a kiss. Like it was a kiss on the lips from what I remember. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah, at the end.
I was like, wait a minute, are they like? Is it a friend kiss? Like usually friends don't kiss on the lips, but like I don't know. I thought.
Yeah, I think it's just. I interpret it as friendly, but that was kind of
Yeah, it was like a wait. It was like a what
gesture? Yeah, exactly.
I was like, wait, what are they? Because friends on the cheek, like kiss on the cheeks is like more like platonic, but like kiss on the lips is like, wait a minute, is there something going on around here? Like, is she like with him, but he loves? Okay, anyway, it just happened all at the very end, and I'm like, this ending seems very like sudden, out of like not out of place, but like yeah, it just felt like there was like a lot more like added drama. You know, it's like Will realizes that he's talking to his dad, and then John sees one of his grown children die for the first time. um,
Oh, so Sandy does go with him in the end, though, right?
yes, yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
And apparently, there's a sequel to this movie.
there is, which I don't think was as well received. Apparently.
It's pretty interesting that there's a sequel, considering that this seems like this is a very like, it's like an independent film, low budget, a standalone. Yeah. I guess like had a following. Like a lot of people seem to really like it online.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a trailer at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I was so confused. I was like, wait a minute, are we watching like? Is this like a sequel? Like I was confused because I thought they were doing a recap of the movie, and I was like watching these scenes, and I'm like, I don't remember watching any of these scenes in the movie because they would flip between like the new scenes from the sequel and the scenes from the old movie, right? And I was like, half of these scenes I like don't remember. I watched like the right version of the movie because I thought there might have been a different version or something, but
no, it was the sequel. And the sequel had a little bit more varying locations, and or that's what it seemed like, right? Like it's not all in one area, but that's a different movie.
Also, another thing I noticed about where we watched it on IMDb TV, and it said in the very beginning that this was unrated, and it could have like sexual violence or like violence, sexual activity, cursing, and I was like, okay, well. And so I was waiting for all that. I was waiting for that stuff to happen throughout the movie, and I was like, "Is there just none of that is happening? Like, why is this movie unrated?" I was very confused.
I just don't think it went in front of a rating board. That's why, and then they put all those.
Oh, the disclaimers. Like, I was like, "Oh, this could." Okay, well,
it could because it's not rated, right? So.
I was so confused. I was like, wait, like, is this movie? Because, okay, when Will came in and pulled out the gun, I was like, oh, wait, here it is. There's the violence part. And then they just left and then gave the gun to, and I was like, okay, well, it's like halfway through the movie, I guess. Yeah, like, I feel like Will kind of like, I mean, not to say he ruined stuff, but like, he kind of ruined the vibes. Like he comes in late, and then like he pulls out a gun. He's like, "All right, his wife had just died, so I he was definitely like, sad and grieving about it. But like, he kind of just like comes in, pulls out a gun, and then leaves, and then he comes back, and then turns on the light, ruining this intimate scene, and it's like, you better be you're telling the lie, or else I'm going to put you in a ward. And I'm like, dude. You ruined this like intimate setting twice. One by pulling out a gun, and two by like threatening the dude to like put him into like a psychiatric ward or whatever. I don't know. And then
yeah. I'll continue. Sorry.
Yeah, he's like an aggressive skeptic,
Yeah, I think he's definitely one of the more interesting characters, right? Or like he has a very interesting dynamic. I thought when he pulled out the gun, it kind of came out of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
Or just like it didn't make sense to me. Like it kind of like escalated from 0 to 100 real quick. I thought he would be I would not expect in a conversation with colleagues someone to pull out a gun first for a claim that they don't believe in, right? And this guy just does it. I was like, oh wow, that guy really has some problems because she had a gun. I mean, it kind of is explained away later that his wife died, right? He's not in a good mental state, and I think it's kind of alluded to that he was like thinking about killing himself. That's why he had the gun on him.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's why John wanted to take it away from him. So this guy's definitely not in a good place. But we also kind of he's also a character that had a lot of foreshadowing. Involved, right? Because in the beginning we kind of see like he has heart troubles, he has to sit down, right? And then later on at the end he kind of dies. But also in the very beginning, right? Like he kind of when he's psychoanalyzing John, right? He's like, oh, do you remember not your mother, but do you remember your father, right? And then that kind of leads down into the different path. Like he remembers, beginning says he doesn't remember his father that much, but at the end he kind of it all comes together. Like, oh, you are like he knows these specific details. about Will's father, and it's just very interesting to see this character of Will is just is someone who brings a lot of foreshadowing, or brings a lot of different elements that kind of tie to the story and that kind of pay off later. So
Yeah.
Definitely one of the more interesting characters about the city that kind of was like placed in this movie. But that whole scene with the gun just again felt kind of out of nowhere. But I thought it did explain away, but it really was kind of jarring.
Yeah.
That it happened.
They had
I don't remember exactly, but I thought it was also kind of bizarre because people didn't seem to have very strong reactions to it. I think they were telling them to like put the gun down, but it wasn't like oh god, he just
he has a gun. Yeah, exactly. That's true. Everything was kind of muted. Like everyone's like, oh, he had a gun, and then they continue the conversation afterward. Like I would, you would think after that happened, the conversation would shift to, is this guy all right? Like what just happened? And they drop it. No, they just go back to the whole. They talk a little about it, and they just go back to the whole. You're right. That is kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like the interactions in this film and the dialogue was very like I felt like it was like, so sometimes it just felt like it's a little unnatural at times. Like it just felt like it was almost forced. Like I'm like watching a game and there's a lot of NPCs that are interacting with the main character. Like it's just like that's kind of like what it felt like in the beginning of the film. Like it's just like, oh yeah, hey, oh okay, yeah. Like it's like I don't know like how to describe it, but it's like it felt, it just.
I feel like there are a lot of times in the movie where each character prompts the story again, right? Like I like to hear more about it. I like to hear more.
Like it would like.
I feel like I heard that a lot, right? From many of the characters, and they're like, yeah, let's go back into it. And that's how they go, kind of go back and track after this distraction. They kind of like, oh, I want to hear more about it, or I like to go deeper into it, or like I have some more questions. But yeah, I kind of feel like that some of the dialogue was a little bit clunky, or just like. Yeah, just doesn't seem like authentic. Especially, I think in the beginning how they started, and who was the biologist, Harry, right?
Harry,
some of his jokes were just like.
I actually really like. I really liked Harry. I don't know. He was like my favorite. I just like the comedic characters a lot. But yeah, I agree. His dialogue was very like clunky at times, which
at the beginning, I think it I don't think it really suited. Like at the beginning, I don't like, but I think as it turned like later on, his jokes kind of a little bit more land, or felt a little bit more authentic later in the movie than in the beginning, like his introduction of his character.
Yeah,
I think there's just difference in that.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's not really too much. I don't really have too much else to discuss with this film. I guess the only thing that this film lends to is like just the ideas that it suggests. But
I also want to go into like the different characters, right? So we went to Will,
okay,
but the other character that I think is Art, right?
Okay.
He was the who was he? He was the archaeologist.
Archaeologist, yeah.
And he was the most antagonistic, right? Which I thought was kind of weird, especially if that maybe friends can fight and be argued, right? But
no, he was. Will was the most antagonistic.
Well, yeah. Will was the most antagonistic. Well, kind of, but it was Art who kind of calls the psychologist in, right?
Yeah.
And Art who kind of at the end just says, "Never talk to me, never speak to me again," and kind of like he was the biggest, I think, skeptic. I mean, I think Will. Was kind of tries to pull the covers, but I think Art was just like in terms of like how he reacted to John was just like he really didn't believe him, and he was I think the most aggressive out of them. It was like what are you talking about? Like, and he always kept saying like I don't believe you, or like what is this phooey, and why don't you just say you're lying. Like he was the one who was really like pushing like that this is not any of this is real. He was like I think him and Will were like the most skeptical. Well, Will I think was kind of like not as antagonistic like in terms of his attitude, right? I think Art was just the one who was like really confronting
John
the whole time, And which I thought was interesting because I thought these were colleagues. I mean, friends fight, but this guy was really like antagonistic instead of like how Dan was just like like more open and just like he wanted to explore more about these hypotheticals and try to ask these questions that like Art wasn't having any of it, and he was just like, no, this is not true, and he's fighting like if a friend kind of brought it up, I think you try to humor them. But this guy was just like, no, you're crazy, you're insane, you deserve to be like he's like no, like this is I thought was just kind of. I mean, I don't know, but maybe people are different. Some friends can be more maybe detached, but Fred is saying some things like this. I think you either react with more concern or more with you might humor them instead. But this guy just goes full out blown like you're crazy, don't talk to me, like I don't like just for this idea, which I thought was kind of strange. But I mean, he's definitely an aggressive force who just a different side, and friends fight, but this guy was just like really like not having any of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, he added a different reaction to it. Like he was the most skeptical. Edith just didn't want to like have her faith questioned, I think. Yeah. It was just more so that.
She did want to have faith, and then she probably got offended, but she never was. She showed concern, right? But I feel like if a friend ever said something like something unbelievable, right? Like would you react out of anger and just like try to dissociate from them? Like, that's what I feel like it was kind of strange for Art to do that. I feel like if you have a friend to do that.
I mean, they're like, I don't know how close they are. Like, they're just colleagues, right? I'm not sure what their background is or like their history between the two. He could have just wanted to drop in and say goodbye as like a colleague professionally, and then when he realizes that this dude is like spouting a lot of nonsense in his opinion, he kind of wants to disassociate himself with him, which is fine. That's understandable. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like the reactions from all the different people, they showed a different flavor of like how they would react to something that seems very nonsensical and at face value. So yeah, it was a good variety of reactions, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I guess pretty diverse. A diverse diversity in the conversation, right? Not everyone's like open or accepting, right? You have someone who's more against and openly hostile to that.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to discuss about this film? Because I think or at least I like touched on everything that I wanted to talk about.
I don't know. I mean, I guess there isn't much in terms of, I guess, the next portion is just like the improvements, like how would you make the movie better, right? And areas like that. I think there's a lot that could be done to make. I think this movie had a lot of potential, and I think I mean, it was limited, right, in terms of its budget and whatnot. But I don't think there's any themes. I think we touched a lot of the themes already. To go over it. It's pretty heavy, this movie. I feel like religion, history, and just time itself, right, and life too. Life is a big one, right? Like, but
yeah.
One thing to note was that the writer, right, Jerome Bixby, he passed away, right? So this movie was made after he passed, right? And he was a big sci-fi writer too, or short story. That's why I think this movie had that feel, right, of kind of like it's kind of like, as you said, like a story, right? It's just like these people are talking to each other, and not much has changed, not much visually has changed, but we get to see how these characters interact on screen instead of on pages on a book, or even like an audio book, right? It's just like we get to see it itself and how these characters interact. But I thought that's pretty interesting how they went about it. But yeah, as you said, there's different changes in the scene. Like the movers, which I thought was kind of interesting, that they had that scene, because like they're having all these like arguments and conversations, and these movers are in the background. I'm wondering like what they thinking when they were hearing this while moving, right? It's kind of I thought pretty funny. It's just like as a mover, like, oh, yeah, or as even as you're having this private conversation, just letting these people overhear what you're saying. But
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, in terms of improvements, I think. Yeah, I guess small. Yeah, I don't know like whether or not they needed Will to like point a gun, like bring out a gun or something. I think that was a little bit like just like added forced drama into the story. Like they could have just had him
a
like
bit much.
leave, and then like he's just like very distraught, and then I mean the audience realizes that like his wife, like one of the characters says like, oh yeah, don't mind, like he needs some alone time, his wife just passed away or something offhand. And like I think that the message from like having Will at being very distraught and like about John's situation is that like sort of like how does he get to live so long when like others, like how is he so special, or like it's like basically like his way of saying that like his John's situation can sort of like or his words or his like insight into his longevity can hurt others emotionally. Like as he's divulging the truth hurts in some sense because of how other people can interpret it. Like why do you get to live so long when like others don't, or something. I think that was like the point of having Will there. I also don't know, like I don't really get why Will had to die at the end. Like that just, I guess it just means to like
Takes the secret down with him,
Well, it's just more so like to confirm that John was right. Like I feel like they could have just like made it into an ambiguous ending, because like when Will died, it basically confirmed that what John was saying was like right. Like he was telling the truth. But like I would have liked it way better if it was an ambiguous ending. Like it's like, oh, was he telling the truth or was he not? Like that would have been like I think more effective in my mind. Because then it just leaves it to the viewer to interpret it. I mean, it's already heavily implied that he was telling the truth, but like, maybe having a little bit more ambiguity to the ending would have been nice. I didn't really understand the whole point of Will dying at the end. Like, it just felt like it was like all of Will's scenes just felt like there was like added drama, like forced drama into this narrative that didn't need that drama because it was basically like all dialogue.
They wanted to make it a little bit more exciting.
I don't know. I just felt forced. I felt like it felt out of place. I didn't really like it. I would have liked a more ambiguous ending, I think. Like Will would have left, and then it would have just been like Sandy and John, and they would have looked up at the stars, and then he's like, I don't know, something corny, like, do you think what I said was true? And then Sandy just smiles at him, and it just ends scene or whatever. I don't really know. Maybe that would have been like really corny of an ending, but like to me that would have been like, yeah, like, or maybe like, yeah, something along those lines.
I don't know. I mean, I like the ending. I like how they made it more definitive, and just I think having Will die, just kind of that reveal. I thought it was just interesting, right? Like he's going through it. I just like how like the kind of reveal, like just that reveal, like oh yeah, about different names in the past. I was John Oldman, John, for the Boston Tea Party, John Party, like Tea Party. I thought that was interesting and funny. So I didn't mind it, right? But in terms of having an ambiguous ending, I'm not too sure if I wanted an ambiguous. I think I wanted to wanted to have more, something more defined. But I think if it ended ambiguously, I would not have minded, right? So I think it would have, I don't think it would have changed my perception, right? Like, oh, this movie, it would have made it any better. If it was, ambiguous, I thought it would have been, still probably a good ending. But I didn't mind that it was, that they kind of confirmed at the end that he was, telling the truth. In terms of having Will die, I thought, that's just, the way they kind of, foreshadow it, like his heart is bad, this guy's old, his wife died already. So he wanted, he already had wanted to die. So I didn't mind that. I thought, it was okay, but yeah, it's kind of like, again, that forced drama at the end. But this tie of secrets and nobody knows except for him and Sandy, I guess. But I kind of agree with the whole gun scene. That kind of was, for me, out of place, and just very strange. It just it kind of was just jarring. Just like that he pulled out a gun. I mean, it's explained away later why, and then, they made a connection. But I kind of agree that it was kind of like, as I said, it kind of escalated really quickly. So I think the character of Will could be one who seems maybe a little bit controversial because he does add elements to the movie, which kind of shakes up the dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And he's introduced. He's also introduced later, right? He's not introduced at the beginning with everyone else. Introduced later, goes away, comes back later.
Yeah.
But he definitely has I think one of the biggest effects for this movie. Is one of the more standout characters, right?
Yeah.
And then another thing that maybe I would improve is probably the beginning, just the introduction. I don't know. I felt like it kind of starts all so sudden in terms of how the conversation started, right? I feel like he kind of reveals like he's Columbus, like, oh yeah, I sailed Columbus, and everyone's just like, what? Like, I don't know why he does that automatically, and maybe that's just maybe the flow of conversation. He just wanted to bring it up, but I just felt sometimes right at the beginning, it just felt so random that he brings up that he was like living with, or he was about to sail with Columbus, and that's how this whole story kind of goes. Because he was talking about hypotheticals, right? But then he kind of just says, yeah, I just sailed with Columbus, and I just thought that was so random. I think having a more natural tie-in, or easing our way into like him, revealing that he's immortal, people questioning it, maybe figuring it out. Like, are you talking about yourself and whatnot? I think that might have been a little bit more organic and better instead of just him bringing up like, yeah, I sailed with Columbus, or I could have sailed with Columbus and I didn't. And then everyone started questioning, what are you talking about? I don't know. I just thought that was just a random way to start this whole, kind of deep dive into his story of being an immortal. So I think I might have changed the way that the whole conversation would have started. But yeah. I think this movie also probably it's I still think it's a good movie in terms of like showing the themes that they had. But I also think it could have been probably a good TV series or anthology, like just like maybe showing like different because he like a lot of the stories he tells, which is very exciting, like the whole like him going with Buddha and Jesus Christ and how that evolved was interesting, and I think can lend itself to having good visual scenery of that, like as a TV series and anthology series, like just showing that. I think that would be interesting to see like how it kind of evolved. Or this one portion there he was talking about how he met somebody who might have been just like him, right? That would have been a good like mystery, or kind of good like kind of like a mystery thing or thriller or intrigue, right? Just like, is there another guy just like me, and trying to figure it out. And he never really is able to confirm, and he meets him like 2 years later, but after that he never sees him again. And what happened to that other guy, right? So I think this series kind of lends itself to like opening more to like maybe like a actual TV series or anthology, like just exploring different parts of his life. But I think for what it's worth, like just him revealing and having all these conversations was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think the dialogue. I think this movie is just basically like, which mentions the dialogue. Yeah, I mean, how would you like rate this movie overall?
That's a question. I mean, I really like this movie, but I think there was a lot to it, which I felt like they could improve upon. Just like a lot, like the dialogue was probably the main setting here, and the main delivery, right? There's not much cinematography or not much visually to look at, which was the medium that movie has, but just the dialogue from this movie I think was very interesting. The themes and morals that they tried to impart was really good, and especially the scene with religion, very intimate scene, which really drew me in. But there's other parts where I feel like this movie obviously can't fault it for being low budget, right? Because it's an independent movie. But I just saw some of the dialogue at the beginning could have felt a little bit forced, and just didn't work well. And I don't know if this is like a movie for everybody, right? Because again, this is not a movie that might be as exciting or interesting. It's a lot of movie about philosophy, religion, and history, right? That other people might not accept or have the same takeaway. But I thought it was a very so. In terms of a rating, I'd probably give it like a 7, I think. because I think it's a good movie. Would I recommend it? I probably would recommend it, but I also have some reservations to recommending because I get this is like a very independent movie, so some people might not like the style of it or like even like the dialogue or messaging from it. And there's some improvement, but again, I still think it's definitely a very good movie. But I just there's things that can be worked upon, and again, might not be for everybody. For like a general audience. So.
Yeah, I think as a movie, it's all right. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think it would have been like, I feel like it could have been like more effective. Well, I don't know about more effective, but I feel like it could have been like more efficient if like it was just a story or a novel. Because I feel like it's mainly just the dialogue.
Author was a short story writer, right? So it kind of I think reflected.
Was it originally a short story though? Like was it?
No, it wasn't. So but the author, right, or the writer who wrote the screenplay, right? Yeah. He does a lot of like short story writing and whatnot. So.
Okay. I see. Yeah, I feel like it would have been like, because I think for me what I got most about this movie wasn't necessarily like, it was just ideas that it sort of explored, and I feel like you could have a lot more time to kind of reflect and explore if you go at it your own pace, which is suggest like reading it, because when you read something you can tackle it at your own pace, whereas if you're watching it in a visual format, like you're basically at the mercy of like the director. That's the pace that they want you to watch it at, and that's the pace that the audience is going to watch it at. Right. And if it's purely just dialogue, then like you can like if there's not much visual like filmography or cinematography going on, then it can just be transposed into like text form, and then like the audience can sort of like just go about it as fast or as slow as they want, and then explore these ideas within the scope of their own imagination.
I mean, I think it's okay that they did it in a movie form. I mean, yeah.
I think it would have been. I think it would have been better if it was in a text form, to be honest. I mean, like I said, I don't mind the movie itself. I think the movie was fine. I just don't think it was like, considering the ideas they want to explore, in that dialogue that they present it with. Like, I feel like if at least it was in a text form, that would have been nice. Maybe you can just read the screenplay. I don't know. That would have been fine too. But like it didn't need to be a movie, my opinion.
I mean, I think I just wanted to tell it in a visual style. And yeah, you're right. Like not much has changed, but I feel like it's still got its point across. Right, you still see characters interacting, and that was interesting, right? Instead of having to read about it and see about it, or just imagine it, you can see it on the screen, right? And these people interact and whatnot. Maybe showing more of the interaction, but I thought it was. I didn't mind that it was in a visual medium, and I think it's fine that it did it that way. Like, I don't know. I mean, not the most cinematic movie, but I don't know how would you change it, or how would you try to make it more cinematic, or would you just say this movie or the screenplay just is not like a cinematic thing that should be done, or if someone wanted to make a movie out of it, like. Because I mean, I really thought the dialogue was well, right? Like at least like near the end, or like right. I kind of wanted, and there was a very interesting scene, right?
I think the movie was fine. Like I said, like it didn't, but at least have it in a short story form too, like text form. That way people don't have to like watch the movie, like spend an hour and a half watching a movie to read something that they could read by themselves, to get the same point across. Like, I just feel like it's not like, it doesn't necessarily contribute anything visually that you can't just imagine yourself when you just read from a book. I'm not much of a reader, by the way. Like, I don't really read too much, but like, I don't think that like it could exist as a movie. It's fine to exist as a movie, but also like it should. I feel like it existing in text form is also like beneficial. Because like some people can read really quickly, right? Like this, if you transpose this movie into a book, it's probably like a really short story. It's not even that long. It probably wouldn't be that long. They could probably read
Right.
it in like 30 minutes, whereas like to like and get the same points across. Whereas like if you had to watch the movie, you had to spend an hour and a half, and like some people might just get really bored, right? Because there's not as much happening. So like if in order to like sort of, in my opinion, to sort of reach a broader audience, like having it at least in text form so that people can like sort of get the same points by in their own frame of reference, in their own like timeline, like not timeline, their own speed of, then it could be like more effective way of like.
I don't know. I mean, you say broader audience, but I feel like a movie is probably a better way to reach a broader audience than it is to release a book. I feel like when you release a movie, it's more visually appealing, and you can people it's kind of given to you, right? You don't have to work at making it. You can just sit there and consume as an audience. So as in terms of reaching a broader audience, I think this was probably a better way to do it than just writing a book, like a short story or a book, which is limited because people have to read and imagine. Where here it's kind of being like force fed to you, right? Like, oh, you're sitting there and you have to consume it because you're not you can't just put it down because now you're in it and watching it. Yeah, you can stop playing, but I think it's kind of forced there. So in terms of reaching broader audience, I think this was probably the better medium to do it.
I disagree.
This way.
I disagree. Yeah, I don't think it's the better medium. I think it could work. I think both medium can work. But if I had to choose one or the other, I think the book form would be better.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think it's like, I think a movie and video or showing that. I think having dialogue. I think maybe it's like as an audiobook might be better, but I think it's trying to reach trying to send it to the masses.
Audiobook could work too. I think
trying to do that. Otherwise, it's like a book. You have to people have to pick it up and read it, and you have to engage with it.
But you can always set it down. Like you don't if you're bored with the book, you can just set it down and come back to it later. Like a movie, you kind of just. I don't think many people.
Right, but that's the thing. Like the movie, you're trying. It's trying to do. It's technically forcing you, right? You're sitting there. You have to consume the minute you want to.
But do you think people will actually watch this indie film and come about it with the same like a whole hour and a half and just like. I don't know. I just feel like I don't think that. I think people might be disinterested in this movie in the first like 15 minutes and not want to watch it, not want to continue it. Whereas in the book, they can like, they don't have to necessarily be like, oh yeah, question like the voices or like how the dialogue is, how the characters interact, how the visuals are, because like it is a pretty low production film, right? So it's not visually like as appealing as some other like bigger films. So people might be disenchanted in the very beginning because it's not visually appealing. The audio is not like the character interactions seem a little clunky. Whereas like if you read it, you can imagine it. You can like sort of like, get past the visuals because you're imagining it yourself. Like you're not limited by like a lack of technology or a lack of like a low production.
Right.
That's the thing. If it had better production, if it had better maybe character chemistry, if it had better maybe more fluid interactions, then perhaps, yeah, I could see this film being better. But like at its current state, I don't necessarily think that it's like going to reach a broader audience. It like I said, it's going to be like it's very much almost like a cult classic. Like it could be like specific to a certain sci-fi genre of like audiences. But like I think the ideas that presented in this film can be like very like broadening for like a lot of people. And if you're trying to reach like the broadest audience, then you don't want to necessarily want to limit yourself based on your production value. Because some people are just not going to watch the film because of the production value. They're going to see it 15 minutes in, they're going to be like, an hour and a half, I don't want to watch this, click away. Whereas if they open up a book, some people don't like to read. I don't really necessarily read, but like, they're not necessarily limited by that aspect. They can like pick it up, drop it whenever, come back to it.
Okay, I guess that's a fair point. I think that's a very fair point. Like people kind of judge like the value, production value, right? So if you're watching it, like the first time I've watched it, right, I was like, oh, this is not what I'm used to seeing in a movie. I like a movie like the visual, right?
Yeah.
But I sat through it and I still watched it. But I do agree, like the production value can definitely turn people away, especially for this kind of movie. If it was improved, it might have attracted an audience or attracted like just the way that it was filmed and for the technology. I think might have probably got people to stay for a little bit, and you made the dialogue at the beginning. But I think you're right in terms of like production value. I think has a, especially for a movie, right? Has, you know, if you're going to invest it, you know, time, it definitely will have an effect on whether people want to watch it, right? Especially in the first, you know, few minutes.
Yeah.
So in terms of for this movie, I think the production value could have changed, but I still feel like the content, right, of this movie, but still, I think it can still lend itself to a visual medium, right? And better. But I think you're right in terms of like this, taking this movie as it is right now, for like, you know, what we see it. You're right. It probably won't be the best medium to express these ideas, but I think it could be if it was updated in its technology. So
yeah, I think maybe if this story was first written as a short story or even a book in the beginning, and then it got adapted into a movie. If the book was popular enough, then it could like have a better production, maybe have a higher production value, and then like people might be like interested in watching it because they're like coming up from the book. Like it builds an audience from the book and then adapts it into the movie. I don't know.
But then do you think if Hollywood did capture it after a short story, would they try to make it, I guess, more flashy, right? Try to, you know, put more embellishment in here, right? Because right now this movie, right, it's just about dialogue.
Yeah.
Right, and it's very intimate, right? How these people, you know, talk to each other, and see it, right? And I think that was still pretty, you know, done pretty well for what it did, right? I don't think it needed to have like cutaways, like flashback. It could have easily done that, right? We have flashbacks and cutaways and different things, right? But they didn't. It was all self-contained, right?
Yeah,
but I feel like if Hollywood, you know, upped its production value, instead of just, you know, updating the visual, they probably try to add different storylines and plot points and whatnot. Which I think may have ruined, right, what this movie was trying to get at or say. So,
well, I mean, I guess it depends on how the whatever the studio, whoever gets I mean, that's just like, I don't know, that's more of a theoretical, like hypothetical. Like,
that's true. Yeah.
Like we don't really know how it works behind the scenes. Or at least I don't know how it works behind the scenes. But yeah, it's possible. Yeah, it's possible that they would have added these distractions to sort of like more like bring in a broader audience. It's true. That's a fair point. Yeah, I don't know. So as a film, going back to like how I'd rate it, I mean, I enjoyed it. I'd probably give it a 6. Yeah. I just don't know whether or not it's like I would recommend it at its current state to anyone. I think it would be like an asterisk. You're like, oh yeah, if you are really into like exploring these like maybe this science fiction ideas or science ideas or like just ideas in general about life, then yeah, this movie is pretty good. It's not too long. Like you get past the quirkiness of the dialogue and the visuals, and yeah, I think you can find yourself in taking something away from it, watching it. Yeah.
Very true.
So
okay, that's 6. So not much of a difference between us.
Yeah, I mean, I personally enjoyed it. I thought it was like engaging enough.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I would like recommend it. It's like if someone wanted to watch a movie, they're like, oh, do you want to watch like sci-fi movie? Recommend a sci-fi movie. I don't know if this movie would be the first. I probably wouldn't actually, but
that's a good point. Like, would I recommend? I mean, I think if someone asked me, should I watch this movie? I'd probably say, yeah, you should. But if someone asked me for a recommendation, would I put this movie up front? I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I would be in the same boat as that. But yeah, cool. I guess this is like nearing the end of the stream. Couple of things. We actually selected we have figured out our next movie. So next week, we're going to be watching a movie called Nomadland. I'll put it in the chat. Next week's movie
critically acclaimed
is Nomadland. There we go. And like, yeah, something cool about this movie is that I guess it's pretty recent, so it's like, once again, like, and it's critically acclaimed, and yeah, we're looking forward to that. It's always nice to watch like, more recent. We don't. I feel like we don't really watch as many recent movies, but so it's
I mean,
always
for the past month, we kind of have.
we have
Oh,
okay.
not
well,
really.
We only watched Minari. I feel like that was the most recent.
Minari. What else was there?
I guess we watched Knives
was
Out,
pretty recent.
but that was like,
Yeah.
Knives Out was fairly recent. And then of course we have I link our YouTube channel where we post these VODs in a more concise, abridged way.
Not really.
Not really. That's not good marketing.
Yes, no, watch it. Sure. Subscribe.
YouTube channel. And yeah, every week, 11 a.m. Pacific time, we discussed our film. So next week's movie, Nomadland. I don't know. We might have a special guest. I'm not sure yet, but if we do, you'll know. And yeah, have a good day whenever you watch this, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
Bye.